Hello everyone. Today I wanted to bring you our top 5 up-and-coming non-recessive morphs. So this would only be codoms and dominants. I'm gonna lump them together because honestly this was a hard enough list to make as is. I thought that this was going to be an easy one when I started researching this video, and I was horribly mistaken. This is a video I had to research, go to mount. These top 5 aren't really even my favorite ones necessarily. I do like them, but what I'm basing the criteria of this on is a high amount of interest in these 5 genes and a low amount of combos worked relatively when considering other recessives it could go into. Some of these morphs have 300 or maybe even more examples of them on, say, something like Morph Market, but they have in a lot of cases a relatively low amount of recessive combos that they've been worked into so far. Now, a big difference between dominants and codominants and the recessives, especially when it regards to what I'm covering in this video, is that codominants and dominants can pass along to their offspring a lot easier. It's guaranteed 50% every single time, really. So there's going to be a lot more of these available. But the trick here is that there's not going to be a lot of them that have been worked into everything, including into recessives. Another thing I kind of want to bring up before we get into it is that a lot of people have mentioned, even in our video and in the community in general, their displeasure that the market is going towards recessive. And I'm not going to really debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is in fact a thing. It is going recessive. Multi-recessive, in fact, is right now the current direction of the ball python market. At number 5, we have the lace ball pythons. Lace by itself gives a little bit of high blushing. I'd say it's definitely more distinct than, say, something like a yellow belly, but lace works really good with lightening genes and brightening genes, similar to like a desert ghost. If you take a look at here with the fire lace, just those 2 genes alone, you can see kind of a distinct look. It's even more bright than, say, a firefly. In fact, I have a firefly het clown that is also Russo. In a way, it's kind of like Russo. Russo by itself also doesn't really stand out all that much, but when it's comboed with other things, it really does kind of bring an edge to the snake in terms of brightness. So here we have a banana black pastel clown that's possible lace. I probably would venture to say that this is. Just given how much that this brings in the blushing on the sides and really lightens up the snake. I know what black pastel and banana do to each other, and this seems very almost like it has hypo or ghost in it instead. What a lot of people, however, are looking for with lace is the white lace, otherwise known as the super lace. Its super form is really nice. It cleans up the snake and sharpens the colors, brightens it up, kind of similar to Desert Ghost in a way as well. Same thing as I was saying before, this is a super lace pastel fire, so super lace firefly. While fireflies definitely look good, this is definitely a step above. At number 4 is the confusion morph, also known as the acid or static. They're commonly believed to be the same thing, so I'm kind of lumping them all together. If they aren't the same thing, they do mostly the same stuff. In some ways, confusion kind of behaves like leopard in that it jumbles up the pattern, but I also think it adds a lot of contrast. It brings in some more yellowy, tingy oranges to the pattern, and with the darker coloring on the snake, I think it more or less darkens that as well. So it adds a lot of contrast, nice pattern, and nice color. But looking at the differences between what a confusion and a leopard can do, especially in combos, we can take a look here at this pastel confusion clown. It's also het exantic, but that's not making a difference on what it does to this pattern. This really brings in a lot of contrast to the dark blacks on the snake, and that's the thing, is that that is black. Now obviously as an adult I don't know if these colors will hold, but as a baby that is not how my pastel clowns look. The confusion also adds like a lot of these little spots and dots throughout the snake, and those aren't really faded, these little spots and dots. They are very dark black. On top of that, what you get on the head is just a much more unique clown pattern, almost like a bunch of little teeny stars in the sky or little black holes on it. I said that leopard and confusion were somewhat similar in what they do, so what happens when you layer the 2 of them on top of each other? Does it wash itself out? Not at all. It absolutely explodes on this snake. Here we have a fire leopard confusion clown. That's just 3 genes on top of the recessive clown. The leopard and the confusion layered on top of each other just create a almost approaching monsoonish type look feel to it. It just looks really, really exotic. I like the coloring too, but I know a lot of that is the combination of the fire with the confusion, bringing in some of those oranges and then dulling it out almost like it's ghost or hypo. But I think this is honestly one of my favorite looking ones out there. This is absolutely stunning. At number 3 is the Trojan gene. Trojan brings in a lot of blushing and golden colors into your snake. The Trojan by itself almost looks like it's half the potency of like an Ultramel, but it is in fact just an incomplete dominant. I notice a lot of Trojans don't have the exact same alien heads that like a normal ball python would have. They have the same shape it seems, but there's less spotting in between, which really helps add to the contrast that this is bringing in anyway. Taking a look at this example of a great combo, we have our acid black pastel Trojan, which is actually taking our previous number 4 and combining it with number 3. This brightens up the snake in a way that I believe would otherwise be a little bit darker, but not in a way that looks bad. Again, it almost looks like a little bit of ghost is in this animal, and it really makes it stand out. But what a lot of people are looking for, again with the Trojan, similar to the lace, is the Super Trojan. Where the Super Trojan seems to stand out is that it looks very similar to Ultramel or maybe even Monarch. It has its own somewhat unique look, almost like in between the two, which those are somewhat similar in of themselves. So there's a lot of flavors, so to speak, to be had of these types of similar looking snakes. But again, the upside here is that this is not a recessive morph. When you have a Super Trojan, you're always going to get Trojans from it. If you have an Ultramel or a Monarch, all the babies are going to be het. They don't show any sorts of patterns or color mutations, whereas the Trojan even by itself does. Moving on to number 2 is the redhead gene. Redhead by itself is incredibly subtle. It, just like it says, brings in kind of a rusty red on the top of the head of the snake. But it's when you get it into combos that has made it very, very popular. Looking right here at a basic example of a redhead clown. Obviously, we all know what a clown looks like, and it doesn't look like that. So you do have a distinct look when adding just one gene to the clown. It brings in a lot of rusty reds on the animal, and also seemingly brightens up the sides and fades the dorsal stripe on the snake as well. Here we have an example of a black pastel redhead clown. This is starting to approach almost what looks like a Pompeii, however only just 2 genes. You get a lot of contrast on this animal. You have a lot of high white blushing, slightly reduced pattern with a lot of oranges in it, and within those you have a lot of blacks, and on the top of the snake it fades to a more dark black look to it. And finally here's an incredibly exotic looking snake, black pastel fire yellow belly redhead spot nose clown. This is intense, and with this animal it seems like it adds the pattern as it goes down more towards the tail of the animal. You don't really get a lot of pattern on the dorsal stripe of it up until you get almost midway down through the snake, and then it just suddenly starts appearing and becoming more and more prevalent. I don't know if that's just luck or chance, but it looks really, really cool. But you get a lot of just speckling on this animal. It's chaotic and I absolutely love it. Before we get into our top pick, I wanted to go over a couple that I wanted to put on this list, but for the sake of timing on this video, I wanted to keep it at 5. Maybe we'll do another 5 next best picks another day. Just like I did with the honorable mentions on our other video, these were picked because they were on opposite ends of the spectrum as to why they're not in our top 5. Our first honorable mention would be the Cypress. Cypress is really nice. It has these keyhole patterns on it, similar to how Mojave brings in those keyhole patterns. However, the coloration is completely different. It tends to bring in a lot of dorsal striping, and I think it brings in more of a brownie, or in some combos case, orange type look rather than a yellow that you might get in certain ball pythons. Here's a really cool example of a Cypress GHI clown. Again, kind of approaching that Pompeii-ish type look. I believe that something can be said for Cypress being used as a trade-off with some of those genes maybe to make some other cool, unique looking animals. Here's another great example of a Cypress Enchi Fire Yellow Belly clown. Kind of the opposite sort of look of the previous animal in a more bright type pattern, but nonetheless still amazing. You get a lot of more bright orangey lava type looks on this animal versus the dark look of the other one. The reason why we did not include it on this list here, despite it being one of my more favorite genes we talked about today, is that it is starting to become more prevalent. You see it a lot in clown, you're starting to see it in a lot more combos. So I wanted to leave it off the list because it is starting to see some attention in these combos, and it's only growing from there. And our other honorable mention would be the Mandarin. The reason why Mandarin was not on our list is because I think that there is either a lot of misrepresentation in what is available on Mandarin, or there's a lot of animals that might be a different gene that's labeled as Mandarin, or it very well could be that there's just a lot of variability with Mandarin. But when you find a really nice looking Mandarin, man, it lives up to the Mandarin orange name. Mandarin just generally, when done right, brings in a lot of dark oranges. As they age, however, some of these individuals will lose some of that color coloring, and some seem to keep it, which is where some of that confusion comes on if people actually have a mandarin or not, maybe. However, what I wanted to bring up is the super mandarin, and there's no doubt that the super mandarin is definitely an amazing looking animal. Here we're looking at an example of just a super mandarin. Yes, it's het hypo, but it is not hypo. You get a lot of these nice contrasts. The pattern on the snake is now a deep orange. What I really love, again, is the contrast, but in just a different way. A lot of times when we talk about contrast in a ball python, it's like a yellowy type color, but this brings in the most orange ball python I've ever seen. This is orange. It's not orangey, it's not orangish. This is orange. It is outstanding. This is something that probably would have contended with number one, but you gotta make sure you get the right one. This is something that if you get in on and you get it on right, this is one that's gonna be really, really big, because it kind of already is. And at number one for our top non-recessive gene would be the stranger. It is very sought after. Just a single gene alone is about $2,000. And that's saying something for an animal that's gonna pass that gene on 50% of the time to its offspring. The stranger brings in dark coloring, similar to what mahogany does. It has a very dark head and a very dark body. It also changes up the pattern of the snake, reducing it a little bit and changing the color on it to a sort of almost like burnt type feel with an orangey tint. Here you can take a look at an example of basically just a stranger pastel. Het pied and possible het clown, but again, that's not affecting anything on here. You can see the difference between what would be a pastel, basically, and a pastel stranger. The colors on the ball python here seem a little bit more orange, whereas in normal pastel, they're gonna be a little bit more yellow. You also get these dark colorations around the sides of the snake and around the dorsal end patterns of the snake. Again, it really changes up the pattern on the animal as well, which is one of the reasons why it's so popular, is that it darkens and changes your pattern up. Layering clown on top of that, we can see a major difference here, not only with the pattern, but the coloring on the animal as well. The coloring down the back on this animal is more orange. You get a lot more contrast than you would with a normal pastel clown for certain. A super stranger has also been produced now. I believe Canova showed off about maybe 3 or 4 months ago. This one is just very dark with even more reduced pattern. Stranger seemingly has the most interest combined with a lot of potential, which makes it our top pick of these 5 up-and-coming non-recessive ball python morphs. Hope you enjoyed the video. What genes would you have put on our list? Because I know you've got them. I still would like to know. If you didn't catch our video on the top 5 up-and-coming recessive morphs, you can check that one out right here.